inside his heart, so within. An angel came with words from God. Things were still, saying, read inside his heart, confused by what had occurred. There was only one who could comfort him, to help him see the light.
I grew up in Canada. And if somebody interviewed me, you know, when I memorized Quran in Canada when I was, started when I was 11 years old. And I would travel by airplane, 2 hours away by airplane. Canada is a very big country, to go to one of the very few Quran schools that was there. So I could memorize Quran. I was away from my parents at such a young age. So when somebody sees me, mashallah, Muhammad, you grew up in Canada and you memorize the Quran, how few of the people have memorized Quran? And so I see people that succeeded in the years in coming back to Allah, and I've seen people who failed. Now, this is one of the things. When I was teaching some Islamic courses, I noticed in the Quran that when the disbelievers would argue with the Prophet ﷺ, there's a very interesting response that Allah Azza wa Jal tells the Prophet ﷺ to tell the disbelievers. So they make a statement about kufr or shirk or something like this, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ, say, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, go and travel in the land. It's a very interesting answer. Somebody is arguing about this Jesus or this idol or something like that, and you say, go and travel in the land. So what's going to happen if they travel in the land? This is my advice to those parents that want to help guide their children. I'm telling you, take your child and travel in the land. Take your children and go camping. Take your children, if you're always in your vacation, you're going back to India, you know what, or going back to Pakistan or going back to Egypt, in your vacation in the summer, take your children and go to the Philippines. Let them see the world. Let them see other cultures. And you'll see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows upon these children their own character. When they see the world like that, they become stronger. They become stronger children. I've seen youth in the Muslim Students Associations across Canada and the US, many of the most active students are from the Emirates. I'm serious. Why is that? They would be, for example, they're coming from their country, they might have been expatriates here in the Emirates, and then when it came to the university, they went to the US, they went to Canada or something like that, and they became active. This is a child who grew up traveling. And it's their nature to travel. Go ask the people in the US, and you'll see that a big majority, the majority of people who are active in the da'wah are foreign students. They're the travelers. Always happens. It's a recurring theme, city to city to city. It's the travelers that are the ones that are making the difference. قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, take your children and travel with them. Another thing that I would tell you with your children is the human being is designed to conform. Have you noticed how, we dress similar? For example, if somebody goes to Mecca, they may never wear a thobe, but when they go to Mecca or Medina, they go and buy a thobe. They conform. And human beings were like that. Any society we get in, any group of people we get together with, we conform with them. This is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. We conform. Now, this is a double-edged sword. It can work for you or against you. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But as a smart, intelligent parent, what you do is you make sure that the atmosphere around your children is an atmosphere that when they do conform to the atmosphere, it will be good confirming. And that's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, مَثَلُ الْجَلِيسُ الصَّالِحِ وَالْجَلِيسُ السُّوءِ, that the example of the good friend and the bad friend is like the person نَافِخِ الْكِيرِ وَحَامِلِ الْمِسْكِ, is like the person who blows fire or the person who carries musk. And you all know the hadith. Now, you know as well as I do, if you go into an area that has fire, your clothes are going to stink like the fire. And if you go into an area that has beautiful perfumes, you know that your clothes are going to have that beautiful smell of the perfumes. You know that. Now, I'm telling you as a parent, that you should put your children and take youth into environments of misk, so that, for example, if I see a child that's a very good child, very intelligent, memorized a lot of Quran and has good khuluq, I will try my best to make sure that I can bring this child into my house. I would tell my wife, maybe let's teach this child something, because I want my children to get some misk from this child. Now, if this child comes and the child is naughty and he's acting bad, and I see my own children acting like that person, I will get that nafikh al-kir outside of the house. Get back. I wish you the best, but you can't come in our house anymore. You want to put your children in misk environments, and then they will naturally start to absorb this. The final advice that I would give to those parents is that when it comes to the memorization of the Quran, I'm not saying every child should have the Quran memorized, but what I'm saying is every child should have a connection with the Quran. It's so sad when somebody finds herself in university or older, and then they say, I don't know the Quran, my parents never taught me. And they have no connection. Maybe they'll go their whole life. Because of those years, they didn't focus on it. And I'm not saying they have to memorize the Quran, but they should have a connection to the Quran. In the West, we have a standard that people very often, they say, I've memorized Juz Amma. Right? I've memorized Juz Amma. Oh, mashallah, you memorized Juz Amma? Good for you. Do you guys have that as well? Can you just raise your hand? Let me see if you guys also say that. Or do you have higher standards than that? Okay? If you've ever heard that statement, I memorized Juz Amma, it's almost like the community has conspired together to make the standard Juz Amma. So whenever a child says this to me, I memorized Juz Amma, I would say to them, how long ago was that? Because I hope that was yesterday. Because why did you stop? Who says Juz Amma is the ultimate goal? That you just finish a Juz Amma and khalas, you're done for the rest of your life. You're on a roll, let's raise the standards. So I'm not saying they have to memorize the whole Quran, but I would like, for example, the children to have a 5 juz standard. Let's raise the bar a little bit. So you aim, for example, that your child memorizes 5 juz of the Quran. Doesn't have to be all together from the front or the back. Maybe some surahs from the back and some surahs in the middle and some memorization here. But let's raise the standards so that when we say to the children, oh, mashallah, child, how much Quran have you memorized? That inshallah we hear more often the child saying 5 juz of the Quran. And then hopefully another generation, it can be raised higher and higher. I want to give you this example from the Malaysian example. Malaysia, Indonesia. Anybody here from Malaysia, Indonesia? Yeah? Nobody? Okay. I was at a Malaysian-Indonesian conference. And in many cultures, in many Muslim cultures, they don't have that much strong connection to the Quran. Okay? What I mean by that is if it's salah time and you ask a certain culture, can you lead the prayer? Oh, it's very rare to find people in certain countries that so many people know how to read Quran properly that they can lead the prayer. If you've ever been in a situation like that, you might understand what I'm talking about, right? So you lead the prayer. No, you lead the prayer. No, we don't know how to read. We're 50 years old, we still don't know. So in this Malaysian conference, they said that we're going to have tajweed halaqas after Fajr. Now I was giving lectures and I said to them, you know what? I need to rest after Fajr because I have lectures coming up later in the day. They said to me in response, no, Brother Muhammad, we don't need you to teach anything. We have enough teachers amongst ourselves. I said, MashaAllah. Yeah, and they brought all the people in the conference. Everybody was in a group of 6, a group of 10, because they had so many Quran teachers amongst themselves, students. And check that next time when you're speaking with Malaysians, how many of them know tajweed, how many of them recite like Qari Abdul Basit. You'll see so much because it's their standard in their culture that they teach their kids tajweed. And hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, we can also raise our standards for our children. Ameen. The final thing that I want to speak about is that circle that's out of your control. The circle that's out of your control. And there's so many things that can be said about that. One thing is how we spend our time. A lot of the things that we're spending our time in, with all this technology that we're getting, it's almost like we're spending more of our time on things that don't concern us. It's just whatever flashes in the corner of our eye with no intelligence. we just surf along and just go in that direction, not paying attention to it. And I would hope that a person starts putting times. What I do is I put a timer. I have a clock on my computer. It's a timer, and it might have a countdown, a 50-minute countdown, a 40-minute countdown. And I'll say, I will not allow myself to be distracted during this time until the time goes down, and then I'll give myself a break, 10-minute break. I can do whatever I want after that. But I put myself in discipline that I'll do my work, I'll do my focus, I'll do my reading, I'll do my studying, or whatever I need to do. And then when the alarm goes, okay, then I waste my time and I go, do fun thing, whatever it is. But you have to have that discipline, because without the discipline, your mind is going to be check the email, check this, check that, go here, go there. 2 hours passes by and you haven't done anything. And things you can't control, things that are outside of your influence, is just not important. It's not urgent, and it makes no difference in your life. And if you continue, this is a big warning here. If you continue to do this, your life will become meaningless like that. Because your day-to-day actions is who you are. Your day-to-day action, put them together, it makes your life. Who wants to come on the day of judgment saying, I surfed the internet? That's what I did with my life. I went on the internet. Well, good for you, mashallah. What a great thing. It's almost sad. You want to achieve something in life. Okay, now, question. When questions come up and your thought process, I want to talk about concerning ourselves with things that benefit and not concerning ourselves with things that don't benefit. When it comes to questions, people ask questions that if they knew the answer, it would make no difference in their life. So for example, somebody comes to me and says, Brother Muhammad, I'd like to ask you if the dinosaurs, did they exist? Did the dinosaurs exist? I'm thinking to myself, who cares? It's a long time ago. Let's look at the options. The dinosaurs exist? Okay, who cares? The dinosaurs didn't exist? Who cares? How is that going to change your life? Whether you know, and many questions are like that. As soon as somebody asks a question, the response question in my mind is, how is this going to make a difference in your life? That's always going through my mind. And I think to myself that if you're asking questions, ask questions that can benefit you in your life. Things that are in your control or things that are in your influence. So that your questions, you can actually benefit from the question that's being asked. So here, for my example, I give you the example of the dinosaur. And by the way, you can ask any question you want. I'm not going to call you dumb or anything like that. It's okay, we're all learning, and I probably asked about dinosaurs when I was young too. Here are the type of questions that I would encourage you to ask, and kind of like seeking knowledge type of questions. Question number one is questions that begin with, can you advise me on this specifically? Can you advise me on this specifically? Right? And what I would do is if I see people, usually I look for what is their specialty. What is their specialty? This is a cardiologist. This is a doctor who deals with the heart. So then I think to myself, how can I benefit from this person? So I think to myself a question. I say, is the mind in the brain or is it in the heart? I will ask the cardiologist and start a discussion like that. Something that could benefit me in my reflection of Quranic verses. I see a child. How are you going to benefit from a child? Right? What do they have to share? If I see a child, the thing that I would ask the child is, who are the names that your other fellow students are talking about in school? When he tells me that, the next time I do a lecture, I start using those names. I'm up to date and I'm cool. As he told me the toys that they play with and the things. And so when I speak to them, they say, MashaAllah, Brother Muhammad speaks our language. Because I benefited from that youth that I was speaking to. Whoever you're speaking to, you're asking questions from their specialty, things that you can turn around and benefit. So those are advise me type of questions about things specifically. The next thing the type of question you want to ask is, when you hear something and one of your teachers is saying something, you ask a question of, how can I implement this in such and such a location? So for example, I told you, travel with your children. So you might say, Brother Muhammad, this is my situation with my child. How can I implement traveling with my children, going camping with them? And also, don't leave the thinking up to the person that you're asking. And this is the third advice that I would give you. Say that this is what I've done, and I would like your feedback, your consultation on what I've done. Can you see how that makes those questions that bring no benefit and make no difference in your life? It brings you into the circle of things you can change. And if you change, just inshallah ta'ala, hopefully, just in these few minutes that we're sharing together, those little tweaks and those little changes in the way that you ask and the way you seek knowledge, I hope inshallah ta'ala that it will open like a floodgate of knowledge into your brain. And that you'll be able to ask better questions and more beneficial and get more consultation. And then it just comes and feeds into you until you benefit so much, inshallah ta'ala. In conclusion, I would like to say that, there's a statement that I heard and I thought it was so beautiful. And it says, let's not waste time discussing what a good person should be. Let's not waste time discussing what a good person should be. Instead, let's just be that person. Jazakallah khairan. This is Muhammad Shareef from Canada. Assalamu alaikum.
I'm sure for most of you, the question answers is getting really something you're interested about. So, alhamdulillah, we'll open the floor now for the question and answer session. We'll take the first question from the brother's side and the second one from the sisters. Like we've always been repeating the rules, try to please stick to the rules. Make sure that you help us with your name and your profession before you put the question, and try to keep it as much as possible to the topic. We'll take the first question from the brother's side on my right.
No dinosaur questions.
Please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
My name is Abdul Hakim Ishaq. I'm from Uganda, representing the Islamic Foundation for Education. My journey on promoting Islam, or speaking about Islam as in da'wah, we often face a question of which it's not like a dinosaur question, but actually is something about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are usually told that he married 9 wives, and then we as Muslims, we actually allowed 4. He married a young girl who's below the age of 9 or something. So how do we explain that to fit the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Thanks.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. You've mistaken me for Dr. Zakir Naik. Okay, so it's okay. I know. No problem. I know we look similar, but okay. First thing. Okay, here's, what I was saying earlier about asking people from their expertise. My expertise is not da'wah to non-Muslims and radd al-shubahat and things like that. But I'm going to give you a different technique. It's a different angle. It's not answering your question directly, but it's going to give you a little strategy when you're debating and when you're discussing with the person. You've now asked me a question. You say, when somebody says this about the wives of the Prophet ﷺ or so on, how do you respond to them? I give you the analogy that when somebody asks you that question, they were driving the car, and you, the way that you're asking me the question, you're in the passenger seat. So this is the person asking you the question, they're driving you, and they're like, so why did the Prophet do this? And then they smash the car and they do it, and you're just going for a ride. Doesn't matter how long you discuss with a person like that, you're just going for a ride until you step out of the car and say, I'll answer your question, but can you please go in the passenger seat? I would like to drive this car. Now, that's the analogy. This is what I'd recommend that you do. Somebody asks the question. I always start with this. It's a technique I learned from Sheikh Yusuf Estes, and it also goes along with what I'm saying. Somebody asks a question. I say in response to them, if I answer your question, would you become Muslim? That's my response to them. If I answered this question, would you become Muslim? They will say no, because they don't care. So they're like, alhamdulillah, thank you for not wasting my time. What do you care about? So let's get to that question. So somebody might come to you and say, why does a woman wear hijab? I would say in response to them, if you knew the answer, would you become Muslim? They're like, no. Okay, so then what would it take? What is your real question? What is the real issue? Now I'm in the driver's seat and I'm leading this conversation. So what I do to that person then is then say, I will answer your question, but if you'll allow me 5 minutes, I'd like to explain what Islam is. Would you allow me 5 minutes? And they'll say, yes, of course, go ahead. And then I tell them Islam and I tell them about the pillar, tell them about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tell them the message of Islam, they're listening. They're so happy that you're in the driver's seat and you let them sit in the passenger seat, and then you would say, now let's discuss this issue. Now that you have the big picture, inshallah ta'ala. Hopefully that'll help you out.
We'll take the next question from the sisters.
This is from a girl who's shy to come up to the mic. She's here and she wants this answer. She says, I'm a daughter. I have a mother who's divorced. My dad remarried. I have a half-brother, and with my father's permission, his family did the christening to my brother. My question is this situation: should I stop communicating with my father? And what should I do about my relationship with my father? And according to my knowledge, he became misguided and he goes to church. So please guide me.
No problem. Jazakallah khair. Remember back when I said to you that one of the most fundamental things that you need to focus on is where do you want to go? Where are you starting with and how do you get there? As soon as the sister is reading the question, I started saying in my mind, what is the goal? What is our destination? That's the way I'm programmed. That's why I'm sharing it with you. What is she trying to achieve? So you'll see with me, use the framework when she says, should I cut off my father? Is that point A? Is that point B? Or is that the directions from A to B? I think you'll agree with me that that's directions. But she doesn't know where she's going, and she doesn't know what she's dealing with. She's just asking for direction. So I would bring that sister, right? Jazakallah khairan. I would ask the sister, what is the goal with your father? I would assume that your goal is to try your best to bring him back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think the sister will agree with me. Now, if you cut off your father, will that bring him closer to Allah? I would assume no. If somebody is far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you say, you know what, I'm going to cut you off, you're already cut off. And you're only cutting yourself off. So the goal is not, even when you hear people say, cut off this person to teach them a lesson, the goal is teaching the lesson. And if the lesson is not taught, then that cutting off has not served its purpose. And I think there's so much misguidance going around and so lack of information and society, things like that, that we don't have the luxury of cutting people off. We need to reconnect with people. I think we need to connect with people a lot more and talk to them and connect with them and be more open and welcoming and this and that. And so you make your relationship with your father a relationship